It burned on water, clung to flesh, and shattered empires, then vanished without a trace. Greek fire was not merely a weapon. It was a contradiction in physical law, a phantom of chemistry, and a terror from the deep wells of Byzantine ingenuity. When it first appeared in 672 AD, it defied not just enemies, but understanding. Launched from the prows of imperial warships in arcs of ignited liquid, it swept across the sea in glowing ribbons, igniting wood, skin, and sail alike. Dousing it with water only intensified the blaze. It was a fire that defied nature, and for the enemies of Byzantium, it defied hope. To understand the terror of Greek fire, one must first understand its time. In the 7th century, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, was besieged on all sides. The old Western Roman Empire had crumbled 2 centuries earlier, and Constantinople stood as the last bastion of imperial might in a world turning rapidly against it. Emerging Islamic caliphates from the south and east threatened its borders, while Slavic tribes encroached from the north. Trade routes were collapsing, armies were stretched thin, and the memory of Roman dominance was fading fast. In 674, the Umayyad Caliphate launched a massive siege against Constantinople. Arab fleets filled the Sea of Marmara, intent on bringing down the Christian stronghold once and for all. The city's massive sea walls, built by the emperors of old, still held, but on the open water, the Arab navy held clear superiority. Siege weapons bombarded the city, while naval forces maneuvered for a final assault. But then came the fire. Byzantine warships, sleek oared vessels called dromons, moved through the enemy fleet with strange bronze nozzles mounted on their prows. With a sudden burst of pressure from hand-pumped bellows, they unleashed torrents of burning liquid. The flames raced across the surface of the water, crawling toward wooden hulls. Sailors screamed, ships splintered, and entire flotillas broke formation in a desperate attempt to escape. According to Byzantine chronicles, the fire burned with such intensity that not even total submersion in water could extinguish it. It clung to the sea itself, as though the very waves had been set alight. And it wasn't just the fuel that killed, it was the terror. To the Arab forces, it appeared as if the Byzantines had harnessed divine wrath. Some fled the battle entirely, believing that no human force could summon such destruction. At the heart of this alchemy was a man named Callinicos of Heliopolis, a Syrian engineer said to have fled his homeland during the Arab conquests. According to legend, he brought with him a formula, a chemical weapon of such potency that it could turn the tide of history. Some believe Callinicos inherited his knowledge from ancient Alexandrian sources. Others claim it was his own invention, refined through years of clandestine experimentation. But whatever the origin, the formula he carried would become one of the most closely guarded secrets in military history. The exact composition of Greek fire remains unknown. Modern theories suggest it may have contained naphtha, a flammable derivative of crude oil, combined with pine resin, sulfur, quicklime, and possibly saltpeter. These ingredients, when mixed in precise ratios, could have formed a sticky, tar-like gel that ignited on contact and resisted conventional extinguishing methods. The addition of quicklime may have caused exothermic reactions with water, creating localized heat that sustained combustion even when submerged. But these are just educated guesses. Despite centuries of research and experimentation, no modern chemist has successfully recreated Greek fire in its full form. What set it apart wasn't just its formula, it was its method of deployment. Mounted on Byzantine dromons were specially constructed siphon systems, essentially early flamethrowers, designed to project the incendiary fluid under pressure. Operated by trained specialists, these devices could launch Greek fire in arcing jets at enemy ships. Their range was limited, but their psychological and tactical impact was immense. In addition to siphons, the Byzantines also developed grenade-like weapons, clay jars filled with Greek fire, sealed with wax, and hurled by hand or via catapult. Upon impact, the jars shattered, spreading flame across enemy ranks or decks. Later innovations may have included portable hand pumps, or even versions carried by infantry for siege warfare. But secrecy was always paramount. Only a small cadre within the Byzantine military had access to the formula or the mechanisms used to deploy it. Recipes were transmitted orally, never written. Components were stored separately in secure compounds. Engineers were vetted for loyalty, and breaches of secrecy were punished by death. It was not simply a military asset. It was considered a sacred trust, a divine weapon that had saved the empire from annihilation. Greek fire's greatest victory came in 717 AD, during the Second Arab Siege of Constantinople. The Umayyad Caliphate launched a renewed offensive, bringing with it an armada to block the Bosporus and cut the city off from supply. Once again, the Byzantines answered with fire. Dozens of Arab vessels were consumed before ever reaching the walls. As panic spread, the siege broke, and the fleet was forced to retreat. Without Greek fire, many historians agree, Constantinople would have fallen. And with it, the cultural and religious trajectory of Europe may have shifted irrevocably. Through the 8th and 9th centuries, Greek fire remained the cornerstone of Byzantine naval power. Western Europe, locked in its own tribal conflicts, could scarcely comprehend the technology being wielded in the East. To some, it was sorcery. To others, heresy. But to the empire, it was salvation. And yet, as the empire endured, the weapon slowly began to vanish. Military treatises from the 10th century still mention its use, but with vaguer descriptions. Some accounts speak of sea fire or liquid flame, but the detailed knowledge of its deployment was fading. By the time of the Fourth Crusade in 1204, when Western Christian forces infamously sacked Constantinople, Greek fire had already become rare. And after the fall of Byzantium in 1453, it disappeared entirely. Some historians believe the formula was lost during the chaos of the sack. Others argue it was deliberately destroyed, its custodians choosing death over betrayal. Still others suggest that the method was so complex and dependent on Byzantine infrastructure that once the empire collapsed, it became impossible to reproduce. Whatever the cause, Greek fire did what few weapons have ever done. It vanished. No blueprint, no surviving sample, just the testimonies of those who witnessed it, horrified, awestruck, and forever changed. When the flames vanished from the surface of the sea, they did not vanish from memory. For centuries after the fall of Constantinople, tales of Greek fire endured like an ember smoldering beneath history's surface. Chroniclers in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia all recorded versions of the terrifying weapon that could burn on water and resist extinction. Some dismissed it as imperial propaganda. Others swore by its reality. But no one, not even the most ambitious chemists of the Renaissance, could bring it back. The formula was gone. But the obsession remained. During the Crusades, Western knights and commanders came into contact with remnants of Byzantine military texts and surviving veterans. Some had witnessed Greek fire firsthand in naval skirmishes or siege warfare. These encounters gave rise to imitation attempts. Formulas passed from court to court across Europe. The 13th century English chronicler Roger Bacon wrote extensively about incendiary mixtures, proposing blends of pitch, saltpeter, sulfur, and tar. But none matched the potency or the water-defying properties of the Byzantine original. Arab and Persian scientists, too, had taken note. Alchemist Jabir ibn Hayyan in the 8th century documented flammable oils and experimental compounds. Later, Islamic military treatises described mixtures of naft, believed to be an early form of naphtha, used in firepots and catapult rounds. These weapons inflicted damage, but lacked the terrifying spectacle of Greek fire arcing across a sea. One problem was always the delivery system. Whereas medieval incendiaries relied on splashing or crude projectile delivery, the Byzantines had developed a method to pressurize and project a sustained stream of liquid fire. Replicating the chemistry was only half the equation. Matching the deployment method proved just as elusive. By the 15th century, stories of Greek fire had become legend. Sailors whispered about it. Military engineers speculated. Artists painted it in illuminated manuscripts, often depicting dragons or angels assisting Byzantine warriors, pouring holy flame on invaders. It was no longer just a weapon. It had become myth. Yet even in myth, the search continued. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as chemistry evolved into a modern science, historians and scientists revisited the Greek fire puzzle. Some, inspired by early petroleum drilling, hypothesized that the Byzantines had tapped into natural oil reserves and distilled crude mixtures long before it was common in the West. Others believed they had discovered a unique form of distillation or emulsification, producing an oil-based compound far ahead of its time. British chemist Sir William Congreve, famous for the Congreve rocket, studied the properties of incendiaries described in Byzantine sources. He concluded that the fire's resistance to water was likely due to a combination of floating oils and a sustained ignition source embedded in the fluid. Still, he could not replicate it. Napoleonic scholars translated and catalogued Byzantine military manuals, including the Tactica of Leo VI and the Strategicon of Maurice. Both texts referenced Greek fire obliquely, confirming its centrality to Byzantine naval warfare, yet offering no technical details. The formula, it seemed, had truly died with the empire. Or perhaps, some speculated, it had been intentionally buried. This theory gained traction in the 20th century. As historical research became more forensic, scholars began to notice a pattern. Wherever Greek fire was mentioned, it was shrouded in euphemism and ritual. Formulas were replaced with invocations, instructions with metaphors. Could it be that the Byzantines, understanding the potential for abuse, erased their own knowledge to prevent its misuse? If so, it worked. Even during the Industrial Revolution, when chemistry and weapons technology leapt forward, no empire replicated it. Not until the 20th century did a parallel emerge, and even then, only partially. In 1942, in the middle of World War II, a team of American scientists at Harvard developed a new class of incendiary gel using gasoline and aluminum soap thickener. The result was napalm, a substance that adhered to surfaces, burned hotter than gasoline alone, and proved devastating in both aerial bombardment and ground combat. Napalm shared key traits with Greek fire. It clung to targets, was hard to extinguish, and created psychological horror. Deployed in flamethrowers and bombs, it devastated Japanese cities, North Korean positions, and Vietnamese villages. But napalm was engineered for mass deployment, not precision, and it lacked Greek fire's mythical capacity to burn on water. Still, comparisons were inevitable. Historians revisiting Byzantine sources noted the similarities in effect, if not in substance. The phrase "modern Greek fire" began to appear in journalism and military commentary, particularly after images of napalm victims shocked the world during the Vietnam War. But while napalm became infamous, Greek fire remained untouchable. Its formula still lost, its mechanics still debated. In the 1990s, archaeologists in Istanbul unearthed scorched remains of Byzantine warships and fragments of what might have been siphon nozzles. Corroded bronze tubes, mounted at unnatural angles, bore residues of hydrocarbon compounds. Some researchers believed they were remnants of a Greek fire delivery system, proof that the flamethrower siphons were more than just legend. If true, this would make the Byzantines the first civilization in history to weaponize pressurized incendiary projection, 1,000 years before the flamethrower re-emerged in the trenches of World War I. And what of the formula? In 2002, a team of chemists in Greece attempted to synthesize a version of Greek fire using pine resin, naphtha, quicklime, and sulfur. Their prototype burned fiercely, clung to surfaces, and resisted basic extinguishing, but it failed to ignite on water. The breakthrough eluded them. Still, the experiment revealed something important: the potential for ancient knowledge to exceed modern expectations. Greek fire may have relied not on a single compound, but on a chemical reaction triggered during deployment, a kind of engineered detonation that modern labs have yet to reconstruct. What makes this more extraordinary is the cultural context in which it was developed. Unlike the scientific institutions of today, the Byzantine creators of Greek fire worked in an empire governed by theology, superstition, and absolute secrecy. Their knowledge passed not through peer-reviewed journals, but through imperial command and guild apprenticeship. Yet they created a weapon so advanced, it cannot be replicated with all our modern tools. This raises a deeper question, one not just of chemistry, but of philosophy. Should we even try to recreate Greek fire? In a world already saturated with destructive technologies, does reviving an ancient superweapon serve any purpose beyond curiosity? The Byzantines themselves seem to wrestle with this. They never mass-produced Greek fire, they never exported it, and they never taught it beyond the empire's inner circle. They protected it, they feared it, and perhaps in the end they chose to let it die. Greek fire was not just a weapon of war, it became a symbol of survival, secrecy, and the terrifying potential of knowledge unleashed without restraint. Its flames did more than burn ships. They reshaped the concept of warfare and rewrote the very definition of technological superiority. Long after the last siphon fell silent and the formula was lost to time, Greek fire continued to haunt the imagination of generals, scientists, and storytellers. It marked the first moment in recorded history when a single invention could alter the course of an empire, not by sheer force, but by psychological dominance. What Greek fire introduced was a new doctrine of warfare: fear through spectacle. In every naval confrontation where it was deployed, the fire served two purposes. First, it physically destroyed the enemy's fleet, but second, and arguably more powerfully, it shattered morale. Commanders who had once relished open combat now hesitated to engage. Soldiers feared burning alive in a sea that should have saved them. Rumors spread faster than ships. The Byzantines had tamed fire, and it obeyed them alone. This was weaponized perception, and it worked. The Byzantines, surrounded by enemies, low on resources and outmatched in manpower, managed to preserve their empire for nearly 8 additional centuries. Greek fire was not their only defense, but it was their great equalizer. And it taught future empires a harsh truth. Victory doesn't always belong to the biggest army. Sometimes it belongs to the one with the most terrifying innovation. In this way, Greek fire became a template. Centuries later, this philosophy would be echoed in the strategies of modern superpowers. The atomic bomb, like Greek fire, was more than a weapon. It was a spectacle meant to horrify and compel. The Cold War was filled with devices whose value lay in their psychological leverage as much as their physical effect. But unlike the bomb, Greek fire came with no manual, no blueprint, and no morality clause. Its secrecy, its almost sacred invisibility, set another precedent: the militarization of knowledge. From the moment it was invented, Greek fire was locked behind layers of imperial control. Access was limited, distribution was forbidden. Even the crews who operated the siphons may not have known how the liquid they deployed was made. It was the forerunner of the modern Black Project, a weapon known only to a select few, wielded in silence and erased when no longer useful. The Byzantines were perhaps the first to understand what governments still know today: that control of information is as potent as control of arms. And yet, the weapon's greatest mystery is that they chose to lose it. Imagine this: an empire under siege, survival at stake, and yet it allows its most powerful technology to vanish. Whether through misfortune or deliberate erasure, Greek fire was not passed to the next age. Unlike gunpowder, which revolutionized global warfare, Greek fire remained bounded by time and place. Why? Some believe it was the ultimate act of restraint. Byzantium had already witnessed what happened when power outpaced responsibility. The very fact that Greek fire could not be controlled once released, that it could not be extinguished, only directed, made it dangerous even to its wielder. In battle, Byzantine ships sometimes caught fire themselves. The weapon required discipline, precision, and faith that the flame would obey. As the empire began to decline, those conditions faded. Training deteriorated, infrastructure weakened, and the once surgical strike of Greek fire became a liability. Perhaps then its disappearance was not a failure of preservation, but a decision born of wisdom, a decision to let the fire die before it consumed its masters. In the centuries that followed, as modern flamethrowers and incendiary bombs took the stage, none carried the mythic weight of Greek fire. It remained singular, a ghost of ancient science, preserved in fragments of history and the fearful awe of its survivors. Even today, in military academies and history departments, the name evokes curiosity and reverence. Engineers marvel at the idea of a 7th century chemical weapon that surpassed the capabilities of some 19th century armies. Historians puzzle over how such a volatile technology remained exclusive to one empire, and philosophers ask whether losing it was an act of tragedy or foresight. Greek fire forces us to confront a deeper reality: that technology is not always progress. Sometimes it is power that must be hidden, or it becomes a curse. The Byzantines seemed to understand this instinctively. They did not brandish Greek fire to conquer the world. They used it to preserve a world already under siege. It was not expansionist, it was defensive. It existed not to dominate others, but to prevent extinction. This is what makes it fundamentally different from the weapons that followed it. Tools of empire, conquest, and mass control. In that way, Greek fire remains uniquely Byzantine, a relic of a civilization that lived in tension between light and shadow, theology and science, empire and encirclement. Its legacy burns not in the sea, but in the choices we still face. As modern societies wield AI, gene editing, space-based weapons, and technologies of surveillance that dwarf even the wildest dreams of ancient empires, we must ask, what have we learned from the Byzantines? They had a weapon that changed everything, and they let it go. Maybe we should remember that. Welcome to the Forbidden Index.